Hello everyone, welcome to another interesting and informative session of the Analyst brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi. In today's session, we'll discuss 7 important articles as featured in the Hindu and Indian Express for your comprehensive understanding of the current affairs explained to you in the easiest language possible. The topics are as follows. From your analysis section, very specifically focusing on the approaching mains 2026. From the first topic, we'll try to cover that how we can strengthen India's electronic vehicle supply chains. Then, in the second topic, from the perspective of environment conservation, we'll try to see the new definition of Aravallis which has been set by the apex court of the country. Keep this in mind that will also provide you the much important mains value addition, and in that the today's topic is going to be accountability. Then we will also going to take up some prelims pointer. We will try to simplify the news for you and also provide you the much important value addition. So stay tuned. Where the article chart paths for strengthening our country's electronic vehicle supply chain by focusing upon reducing the vulnerabilities which has arisen thanks to the external shocks or supply chain disruptions which we are facing thanks to the ongoing Iran-Israel war and the geopolitical tension which is prevailing in the West Asia. The issue which has high probability of being asked in the mains examination from the sector of GS3 paper under the larger theme of infrastructure and energy sector. So let's first try to develop a profound understanding about what is the need of such large-scale adoption of electric vehicles and why our government is putting so much impetus on this particular sector. To understand that, we'll refer to a report which has been published by the Niti Aayog and is titled Unlocking a $200 billion Opportunity Electric Vehicles in India. According to which, the vehicular emission which takes place not from these electric vehicles but from the internal combustion engine based vehicles which actually run on fossil fuels like for example diesel and petrol. This vehicular emission actually act as a major source of pollution and carbon emission in our country. So for example, let's say the vehicular emission which is taking place from these fossil fuel using vehicles who actually run on internal combustion engines and they are running on fuels like for example diesel and petrol, they actually amounts for total 25 to 30% of the total concentration of particulate matter 2.5 and 10 which exist in our country, 25 to 30%. At the same point of time, they also amount to almost release of 4.6 million tons of carbon dioxide emission on annual basis. And keep this in mind that this 4.6 million tons of CO2 which is actually being emitted on the annual basis actually amounts for 14 to 15% of our total greenhouse gas emission. Keep these three important data in your mind. Now, let's try to assess them one by one. Just imagine that if we end up cutting this vehicular emission which is taking place from this internal combustion engine based vehicles, don't you think we will actually end up safeguarding our lungs, actually end up reducing various kind of cardiovascular diseases which take place, or we will also end up actually significantly reducing the out of pocket expenditure which takes place on health. Similarly, if we end up cutting down this 4.6 million tons of carbon dioxide emission, don't you think we can very significantly decarbonize our energy sector and at the same time end up diversifying our energy basket as well? It will also eventually help us to achieve the Panch Amrit target which we have taken for ourselves at the COP26 or Glasgow summit to become a net zero emission country by the year of 2070. The next and very important component is that these diesel and petrol, we have very limited resources of that. And thus as a country, we are almost 87.6% import dependent for our crude oil need. Keep this in mind. And this is the data which has been provided to us by the International Energy Agency. So now if we are switching away from these internal combustion engine based vehicles to these electronic vehicles, electric vehicles who actually run on let's say lithium ion batteries, don't you think we will not be required anymore to actually import this crude oil? Thus it will significantly reduce our import dependency on the crude oil. Considering we are 87.6% import dependent, keep this in mind that as per the data provided to us by the Ministry of Commerce, by the month of January 2026 itself, we were paying approximately $10.3 billion of rupees for the import of this crude oil. Almost 19 to 20, that is 1/5 of this oil is something which we procure from Russia. Second is Saudi Arabia. Third is Iraq. Fourth is UAE, from which we basically import 10.4% approximately. And 6.8% of crude oil we actually end up importing from USA. Keep these rankings in your mind from the perspective of the prelims examination. So, can we end up reducing this import dependency on crude oil? The answer is absolutely yes. Remember that this transport sector itself accounts for almost 18% of the total energy consumption in our country. And just to ensure that the LPG crisis which our country is facing, the same template is not applied to the crude oil needs, our country also have strategic petroleum reserves. And as per the PIB data of 2025, we actually ended up investing approximately $646 million for the purchase of this oil for strategic petroleum reserve. All of this payment is actually being made in the foreign currency, that is dollar. Don't you think that is significantly denting our forex reserves? The answer is yes. And thus also significantly undermining our balance of payment stability. Something which is appearing in the news again and again. This is the data which actually appeared in the Hindu newspaper as per the RBI annual report of 25 to 26. And the data tells us that how total amount of dollar which were actually flowing out of the country exceeded the inflow by almost $30 billion in the year of 25-26, and that is almost 6 times higher than the previous year. Keep this in mind. So there is an impending balance of payment crisis, and if we want to avoid that in the long-term future, shifting to electronic vehicle is also a very viable alternative. Similarly, if you guys can recall, the economic survey data of 2025, which has set up a target for our government that our government is required to create almost 78.5 lakh non-farm jobs every single year to sustain the growing demographic dividend of our country, the growing workforce of our country. And thus, the electronic vehicle sector can also end up generating a large-scale employment opportunity. The estimation by the Niti Aayog is that EV industries will end up creating 5 crore jobs by the year of 2030 in various kind of battery manufacturing, creation of charging infrastructure, also let's say for example the various kind of equipments or components which will be created for these electronic vehicles, charging infrastructures and all of that. Similarly, it can also provide us a security cover in the times of geopolitical disturbances which is taking place, like for example right now in the West. So if we are so much oil import dependent and majority of that actually is sourced from the such choke points which exist, like for example Strait of Hormuz, if in the situation like war in the future, if Iran ends up kind of curtailing any kind of movement across the Strait of Hormuz, don't you think it is also going to have a detrimental impact on our energy security? Something which is very visible right now. Similarly, so let's say what happens. Let's say we refer to the logistic cost. So World Bank releases a report called as Logistic Performance Index, on which our country has basically a ranking of 38. Yes, we have kind of ensured a significant improvement here. But the point is that as per the report, Logistic Performance Index report released by World Bank, our country has a cost of logistic that is almost 14% of the input cost. Let's try to assess this. So let's say for example you are buying a product of 100 rupees. As per the World Bank report, in our country, just for the logistic of that product from the manufacturing unit to your table, it actually takes up 14 rupees. So 14 rupees you are paying only for the cost of logistic. However, if we compare ourselves to China, in China this logistic cost actually stand as low as 7 to 8 rupees. Now let's say majority of these vehicles who are actually kind of exporting and importing your product, don't you think they will also be running on the internal combustion based engine vehicles? And thus they are also using what, either diesel or petrol. The prices of which has significantly increased. Why? Because of these geopolitical disturbances which has created. Thus don't you think that the price of oil or fuel is actually going to increase? Thus the direct impact of that is that the logistic cost is going to increase as well. If the logistic cost is going to increase, the input prices will end up increasing. If the price of input has increased, don't you think that the product will actually become much more costlier? The moment the product becomes costlier, the simple law of economics says that its demand is going to decline. The decline in the demand will eventually lead to what? The kind of less impetus for the industries to actually generate manufacturing output, so manufacturing output will decline. And that will ultimately lead to what? Job layoffs. As the job layoffs are taking place, the salary which was basically being given to these people, that is going to decline, and thus eventually the propensity to consume is going to decline as well of the market, and that will create what? A vicious cycle of unemployment in our economy. This issue of increasing the logistic cost or increasing the input cost, why? Because of the geopolitical disturbances which has taken place outside, and the resultant supply chain disruption is termed as imported inflation. So now, if let's say for example all of these vehicles who are basically being utilized for the logistic purpose, what if they switch entirely to electronic vehicle? Don't you think they will actually become kind of safeguarded from this imported inflation? That is another very important reason. And thus there exists a large scale impetus on the electronic vehicle penetration and adoption in our country. So let's try to assess how much successful they have been. As per the India Charging Report 2025, overcoming the issues of range anxiety, which we are going to discuss, price barrier and EV adoption in India is actually steadily rising, with almost 50% owners making trips covering more than 500 kilometers. So the EV penetration rate, which was just 0.23% of the consumers in the year of 2016, has actually exponentially increased to 7.6% by the year of 2024. Almost 84% of the electronic vehicle owners actually use these vehicles as their primary vehicles. Also, the average distance which is being covered by electronic vehicles, they have significantly increased to almost 1600 km per month, covering almost 95% roads of our country. The government is also putting a lot of impetus to create enough supporting infrastructure. Thus, public chargers have grown fourfold to 24,000 plus. Almost 91% of the national highways are having this coverage of creation of such charging stations and power grid stations within the coverage of 50 kilometers. Also, keep this in mind that these electronic vehicles are going to provide you a long-term cost benefit. For that, we can actually refer to this very specific research report, which was actually done by the Trade Association of India. According to which, if we refer to the traditional liter per 100 kilometer, that is L per 100 kilometer, to measure the fuel consumption for internal combustion engine based vehicle, and we calculate the kilowatt hour per 100 kilometer which is required to understand the energy consumption for EV, if we actually put them at the same level, there is almost a 75% difference in the saving of energy as well as prices when it comes to EV models. 75 to 70%, as you can see, for various models. Keep this in mind. So if you are going to adopt electronic vehicles, you are actually going to save a lot on the energy consumption and the cost of energy as well. So if you look at the status of electronic vehicles in India, just look at its contribution to the economic landscape. By the year of 2024, world's third largest automobile market in term of sale, who has emerged like that? That is our country. The industry's valuation exists for approximately $100 billion. The electronic vehicle amounts to almost 8% of our country's export and almost 7% of our country's GDP. Just look at the significant increase which we are going to witness in the terms of electronic vehicle sales in two-wheelers, in three-wheelers and in passengers car from the year of 26 to 2030. Thus, as per the today's article itself, in the year of 2025 to 26 itself, there was a selling of approximately 2.5 million electronic vehicles. The industries, various EV industries, various car manufacturers, they are actually investing $200 billion in EV by 2030. The Niti Aayog has basically set up a specific target when it comes to the electronic vehicle adoption and penetration by the year of 2030. That the EV shall have at least 30% penetration in the private cars, 70% penetration in the commercial vehicles, and almost every two or three-wheeler which is on the road, almost 80% of that, or more than 3/4 of the total 2-3-wheelers on the market, they shall be electronic vehicles. These are the contribution. These are basically the status of EV. At the same time, we have also very significantly discussed the kind of benefits electronic vehicles actually offer to our large-scale energy sector as well as our economy. But then there also exist some very important persisting issues, which we are going to discuss in detail. The issues which will form an important component of your answer as well. The first and foremost is, India has a very price-sensitive market. Let's try to decode this. So for that, we refer to the Indian Council of Applied and Economic Research data, according to which in our country almost 25 to 30% of the families which exist, they fall in the middle income category. Middle income category basically implies that they have a salary between 3 lakh to 20 lakh rupees per annum. Now, within this scenario, just try to understand the kind of the rising inflation which is prevailing in the market, the high cost of living. Even let's say, for example, if you are sending your schools to these so-called international schools and colleges, the high cost of education, high cost of healthcare which prevails. Or for example, any specific product which you are buying in the market, you guys are also bearing the burnt of inflation. Thus, because of this high cost of living which is prevailing around you, these middle income families, they have a very abysmally low savings. And because of that, it almost takes them 10 to 12 years to actually save the money to buy a car. Obviously, right now the various kind of EMI options or loan options has actually become much more easier. But many of the families, traditionally in their line and outlook, they actually try to avoid this EMI option. So it almost takes them 10 to 12 years to save the money and then go and then buy the car. Now let's say as a family I am approaching to you and you are basically a salesman in the showroom and you are trying to sell me Tata Nexon electronic vehicle. However, when I am comparing this Tata Nexon EV with a simple Tata Nexon which works on the internal combustion engine and thus runs on diesel or petrol, there is almost a price difference of 2 lakh rupees, which is a very huge amount. So for a price sensitive market in India, this high upfront cost which prevails, it is actually going to have a detrimental impact on the consumption pattern of this middle class income, as well as it is actually going to kind of disincentivize them and ultimately adopt this Tata Nexon only. Also because of the less skill sensitization which prevails among them. Why they are worried about the Panchamrit target which we have to achieve by the year of 2070? They will obviously look at their pocket first. Second is the customer safety issue also. Many of the time, this kind of issues, right, where for example, these electric vehicle scooters, they end up catching fire, right, because of some, let's say system failure which has taken place. So all of these news, when they are spread, it also act as a kind of a disincentivizing factor for the consumer to buy it. So if India has such a high price sensitive market in our country, keep this in mind that as per an estimate, we have approximately 30 crore families. The clear data we will get after the conduction of the census. But the car penetration prevails only less than 7 to 8%. So only 7 to 8% out of these 30 crore families living in our country actually owns a car. That is the level of car penetration. So if we want this price sensitive market of our country or this sleeping masses, more than 90% of the people who do not own the vehicle, if we want the adoption of electronic vehicles by these people, we need to first and foremost focus upon cutting down the cost. And a very easier process for that is to actually cut down the input cost. The one very important and the simple input component is your lithium ion battery. And this is where the issue of import dependency for critical minerals becomes an issue. Now recall all the issues which we discussed in the context of the critical mineral dependency which we have, for which we refer to the Global Critical Mineral Outlook 2025 report released by the International Energy Agency, according to which the lithium, which is the most basic component to create these batteries on which electronic vehicle functions, its demand is significantly rising. And as a country, we are 82% import dependent when it comes to lithium. You guys can recall the whole case study which we discussed about the Riyasi district in Jammu and Kashmir. How where we have actually ended up finding the lithium reserves, but we have not been able to start commercially mining those lithium resources. Thus, we are heavily dependent on China, who process 87% of rare earth elements and 58% of the world's lithium refining. India ends up importing almost, keep this in mind, not lithium as a critical mineral to manufacture those batteries in our country, but 75% of lithium ion batteries from China itself. As per the Global Trade Research Institute, this overwhelming dominance which China has in terms of the critical mineral supply, it gives them a kind of a potential leverage against India, turning these supply chains into a tool of pressure in the times of political tension. For example, whenever we sit up on the round table to discuss the issue of line of actual control with them. So we cannot cut down the input cost. Why? Because of this high import dependency for critical mineral which we have. Let's say even then, as a customer, being a kind of an aware citizen, you said no, I am going to discard this internal combustion based engine vehicle which is basically generating a lot of vehicular emission, and to actually help my country to achieve the Panchamrit target, I am going to adopt for the electronic vehicle even though the cost is on the higher side. Then other two issues which you faced is, the first is the range anxiety. So for example, a lot of these electronic vehicles, they actually offer a range of 300 to 400 kilometer on one complete charge. So to understand this issue, let's take a hypothetical example where you have a friend, right? And you, along with your friend, basically plans a kind of a family trip. Both of you say that, okay, we are going to decide and go to visit the region of Kashmir. Take. For that purpose, your friend is basically driving a Tata Nexon, which is basically an internal combustion engine based vehicle, while you are a proud owner of electronic vehicle. But after driving for almost 400 kilometers, your battery has basically drained out. Thus, the first thing which you are basically in the search of at that point of a time is a charging infrastructure. Now here the poor state of charging infrastructure which prevails, that comes into play. So for example, in countries like China, they have ended up creating a grid-like infrastructure of power stations where they ended up creating a kind of a one charging infrastructure for electronic vehicles in 3x3 power grid, 3 to 3 kilometer square. Thus, in China, there exists almost one charging station per 100 people. In comparison to that, in our country, there exists one charging station per 235 people or consumers. So first and foremost, you are actually in the search of a charging infrastructure which exists, that too en route to such hilly regions, that too within the vicinity of you, so that you can basically park your vehicle there. Then when you somehow reach to the charging infrastructure, there exists 235 consumer per charging station. So there is a huge line which is existing there. So while your family is sitting at the back and judging your decision capability, your friend who is basically sitting in comfortably in his internal combustion engine based vehicle, he is telling you tada, bye-bye, and he goes away, right? The second issue is, don't you think, while standing in that line, the very important precious time potential or time quotient of the demographic dividend is also being actually going into the drain. The next issue is the issue of the policy paralysis, where as you can say that we have not been effectively able to support this sector, to support the companies who are creating these equipments in the form of various kind of subsidies. As you can say, no fresh subsidy required for India's EV ecosystem in comparison to China, and that is where the today's article actually focus on. That our country is actually putting less focus on long-term sustainability. For example, we actually ended up providing a kind of a production-linked incentive scheme to actually create such advanced chemistry cell batteries like, for example, lithium-ion batteries. So there is a kind of a production-linked incentive under which we are basically incentivizing every single increase in the domestic production. However, if we refer to the data which has been provided to us by the today's article, under this ACC battery PLI scheme, the total capacity which was awarded was 40 gigawatt hour. However, the total capacity which has been installed till this year is only 1 gigawatt hour capacity. Thus, the passenger electronic vehicles, they are actually sourcing batteries from 14 global manufacturers with almost 7,987 megawatt hours of battery production has actually been imported from outside. And that puts our equipment manufacturers at a structural risk. Why? Because we have been exposed to a single country ecosystem, and this is exactly what China started doing in the month of December. Where? What China said? China said that, you know what, we are actually, trying to reform our critical mineral supply chain. We do not have that much of a lithium right now. So we cannot supply you in the form of a critical mineral. But yes, you are, let's say, for example, an electric vehicle company in India, and we completely understand that you want such lithium-ion batteries. So do what? Start procuring these lithium-ion batteries itself from us instead of buying the critical mineral. So let's say, for example, as a EV manufacturing company in our country, what you might have been doing earlier, you might have been sourcing these critical minerals from outside, manufacturing these batteries in India, and thus kind of getting subsidy from the government under the PLI scheme. Now that entire subsidy actually goes into the drain. China is actually further putting tighter technology restrictions, prioritization of domestic demand, and further, in sharp contrast to us where we are not providing further more subsidies to the EV sector, China is actually has withdrawn the value-added tax exemptions on the battery exports as well. Thus, if there exists such supply chain disruption which has taken place, this inflation in the input cost of the battery will actually delay the price parity with the ICE vehicles and thus ultimately will not lead to the large scale adoption. So what are the schemes which the government has taken? What are the pragmatic steps which has been taken by the government of India which will act as your way forward in the answer? First, we have launched a National Electric Mobility Mission Plan where we are also trying to adopt the grid-like structure of China and to actually create further power grids, charging stations within the vicinity of 5 to 5 kilometers. The PLI scheme actually exists where we are actually trying to incentivize the domestic manufacturing of such lithium-ion batteries. We are also required to create dense and accessible charging infrastructure. So to actually, kind of curb down this range anxiety issue which exists, just like following the China model. Also, we can take up some very stringent or strong steps like for example UK, and thus we can ban the sale of new petrol or diesel vehicle if possible by the year of 2035. Then we shall actually start framing some very specific state electronic vehicle policies to actually provide such electric vehicle complete exemption from road taxes, lower down the toll fees for them, provide them zero parking fees. That will act as a kind of a huge boost to the price sensitive market of our country, because we are giving them a kind of a freebies in this way. Also, the Pradhan Mantri e-bus Seva Payment Security Mechanism scheme, under which all of the public buses which runs, we are trying to transition them into the electronic vehicle. Keep this in mind, we also have FABE India, where we encourage the faster adoption of electric and hybrid vehicle by actually offering them incentive on purchase of EVs. We are trying to support 10 lakh two-wheelers, 5 lakh three-wheelers, 55,000 four-wheelers and 7,000 buses. Creation of 27,000 charging stations is being done into 3 into 3 kilometer square area with an outlay of 10,000 crore for this scheme. So keep all of these suggestions in your mind while you are attempting this question, and we move forward to the next news, where the article highlights the important ecological role of Aravallis and the prevailing issue of deforestation and mining in the region in the context of the recent ruling of the Apex Court, which forms an important component of your GS3 paper under the larger theme of environment conservation. So to try to understand the story completely, right, it is very important to understand that the Apex Court of the country in the month of November 2025 actually issued a ruling in which they basically ended up providing a uniform definition of what will constitute Aravalli hills and ranges, and thus ended up completely banning the release of any fresh mining leases which shall be provided by the government. So if we look at this, it actually looks at a step in a positive direction. But then it ended up paradoxically bringing a lot of furor from the various environmental conservationists. So why this issue actually rose up to such a level? Why the Supreme Court has actually appointed a high-powered panel to further review the Aravalli definition, on which it basically came to a conclusion in the month of November 2025. We will try to understand all of that by actually bringing understanding about the Aravalli range first. The Aravallis, which you guys can see here on the map. The Aravallis, which are actually considered as the oldest fold mountain system in our country, considering they are supposed to be developed in the Precambrian area, and thus they are almost 1.5 billion years old and 670 kilometers long, where they basically span in 3 states, that is Haryana, Rajasthan and Gujarat, and 1 union territory, that is your National Capital Territory or Delhi. Keep this in mind. The highest peak of Aravalli, as you guys can see on the map here, is Guru Shikhar. Guru Shikhar, which is basically named on a saint. The name of the saint was Dattatreya, who is considered to be the incarnation of Lord Vishnu. And this Guru Shikhar peak is actually situated at Mount Abu, where your Dilwara temples actually exist, and it is one of the places of veneration for the Jain sect as well. Keep this in mind that these Aravalli range, they actually end up creating or lead to the origin of various important river systems, like for example Luni, Sabarmati, Banas, etc. You guys can basically remember it through LBS. Luni river, for example, it originates within the vicinity of Ajmer in Rajasthan, traverses for approximately 511 kilometers and ultimately drain in the run of Kutch in Gujarat. Now, around these river systems, there exists a highly fertile alluvial fertile belt, which actually give birth to large-scale dense vegetation like for example forest, grasslands, pastures, etc. And thus remember that this Aravalli range also act as a biological hotspot in this highly drought-prone region. Thus, there exists a large-scale flora and fauna, and to preserve that, there exist a large-scale frameworks or protection networks like for example Sariska Tiger Reserve, Ranthambore National Park, etc. When you are looking at this Sariska Tiger Reserve, so you guys can recall Project Tiger, which was actually initiated in the year of 1973. Sariska was actually included, it is also a national park. So it was included in this ambit of Project Tiger in the year of 1978. And a very interesting fact that it actually served as the world's first site, not countries, world's first site where the successful relocation of tiger actually took place. Keep this in mind. Much before your Kuno National Park, which is very frequently in the news. The article today suggests that how, since ancient times, these Aravallis, which are now small plateaus, they were actually extremely high. But now they have been worn down thanks to the natural process that is weathering. But even human, thanks to our anthropogenic activities, we have led to the degradation of this Aravalli range. Why? Because of the rampant mining which actually is taking place in that region. So first, let's try to understand the significance of Aravallis. The first and the major contribution of Aravalli is that they actually end up preventing desertification of Indo-Gangetic plains. Why? By actually helping the arrest of the eastward spread of Thar Desert into the green belt region of Haryana, Rajasthan and Uttar Pradesh. So for example, let's say there is this flat terrain of Thar Desert, the same Thar Desert where there at one point of time there existed the fertile cities of Indus Valley civilization. Then a Meghalayan drought took place approximately 2000 BC or something, and that led to the kind of drying up of this region. So this flat terrain of desert which takes place, it might have extended into this particular region as well, but thanks to this large scale plateau which exists, that is Aravallis, it actually acts as a kind of a natural barrier. Barrier to what? Barrier to various dry and dust laden winds which actually originate in this region of Thar Desert. Now let's say if Aravalli would have been absent, all of this hot dust-laden wind would have found their route to this green belt region of Haryana, Rajasthan and UP. This dust might have ended up covering the leaves, the surface of crops, etc. Don't you think that would have acted as a kind of a natural blockade to sunlight, thus kind of reducing down the process of photosynthesis? Don't you think that would have significantly increased the desertification intensity in the region, as well as would have reduced the crop productivity in this region as well? Thus, if we say that thanks to the Aravallis, which basically act as a kind of a natural barrier to the extension of Thar Desert, it has actually led to securing the food security in our country and also has played a pivotal role in the green revolution which took place in these states. Then, keep this in mind. If we look at the western disturbances, what are western disturbances? Western disturbances are basically the jet streams. The jet streams which basically originates in the region of Mediterranean Sea. So you guys might be knowing that in the month of December, the sun has actually gone to the Tropic of Capricorn. And thus wind basically follows the basic law. That is, it basically starts blowing from high pressure to low pressure. So if sun is at the Tropic of Capricorn, we can very easily say that let's say here the average temperature will be 20 degrees Celsius. Here it will be 15 degrees Celsius. Here it will be 10 to 12. And in the temperate zone of Mediterranean, it will be actually lesser than that. So here high pressure has created naturally, and this is a region of low pressure. The wind will start blowing from high pressure to low pressure. As it is blowing from west to east, these are basically called as westerlies or western disturbances. So when they are coming from the region of Mediterranean Sea, Caspian Sea, they are actually accumulating a large scale moisture laden clouds. These Aravallis actually act as a kind of a rain shade area. So when these clouds come, they collide with Aravallis. That actually provides some rainfall in this region as well, right? Thus kind of recharging the groundwater, stabilizing the climate in this region, which erstwhile could have been extremely hot and dried. At the same point of time, these trees which are existing from so many thousands of years, so they have very dense roots. The dense roots which basically permeates to the kind of the permeable rock or the bedrock, and they basically extract the groundwater. This groundwater is basically then lost by the trees through a process called as evapotranspiration, thus returning the water to the clouds, providing the moisture in the atmosphere. On this moisture basically starts kind of interacting with the hygroscopic materials, ultimately lead to the condensation, and then again creates what? Precipitation, thus recharging the groundwater, supporting the water recharge systems, and giving birth to these rivers like Chambal, Sabarmati and Luni. At the same point of time, this curse of this region is that it is very rich in the mineral resources, in sandstone, limestone, marble, granite, lead, zinc, copper and gold. Also, as per the National Herald, right, we are just referring to the article, there are some very important statements which you need to keep in your mind. First is, Aravalli Range is India's only traverse mountain system. As most of India's mountain chain, they basically run in the northeast direction, aligned with the monsoon. The Aravallis, by contrast to that, they stand chest out from southwest to northeast. And that is why they are also called as country's backbone, because they are also the world's only ancient mountain range where even today fresh sand dunes can be seen wedged between the primordial rock formation. And this transverse orientation of the Aravallis is the reason why this region receives more regular rainfall, keep this in mind, than the neighboring Rajasthan desert. Also, the mountain range is the country's largest groundwater bank, keep this in mind. However, the region is also facing a lot of issues. First is to refer to the Gandhiji's talisman. We have enough for everyone's need, but not for anyone's greed. And there is taking place a rampant commercial exploitation in the region. Why? Because of the growing economic hunger, the anthropological burden. Keep this in mind that as a country, we have 18% of the world's population. We are going to have world's largest demographic dividend or working force by the next few years. Thus, to actually sustain this much of population, don't you think we need to provide them accommodation? We need to create industries for their employment to make sure that they live a kind of at least a sustainable life. And for all that purpose, we require what? More land, more critical minerals. We were discussing about the electronic vehicles. For that also you require these critical minerals. These critical minerals are present in the Aravallis, and that is leading to what? Illegal mining of the mineral reserves. Just look here. Almost 7.6% of the total forest land in the Aravalli was flattened between the year of 1975 and 2019. 2.2% of the Aravalli area where illegal mining was actually active by the year of 2019 itself. If we refer, there has been taken place a large-scale loss of green cover. If we refer to the Rajiv Gandhi Institute for Contemporary Studies report of 2022, 40% loss of forest cover took place between the year of 1975 to 2019. Don't you think that this loss of forest cover will eventually lead to what? Soil erosion. Also, the reduction of the carbon sequestration as well. As per the report, 21% of the Aravallis will be lost by the year of 2060 if such soil degradation continues. 3.5% of the hills will be taken up for mining by the year of 2059, and thus the desert-like condition will expand from Thar in Rajasthan towards North India as well. There will take place much more sandstorms which will become rampant in Delhi NCR, which you guys can very oftenly hear now in the news, and also loss of wildlife habitat and indigenous flora of the hills as well. What will be the further impact of this deforestation? The loss of fertile soil cover, leading to what? Declining in the food productivity. How then we will achieve basically the targets of National Food Security Act of 2013? The large-scale loss of biodiversity takes place, such as for example the tigers in the Sariska Tiger Reserve, as well as the loss of atmospheric rivers, leading to what? Expansion of drought-prone region in this particular area. So there has been lot of important court orders which actually, kind of presided this one. There was a suo motu order of Supreme Court in the year of 1992, where it prohibited setting up industry, mining or cutting trees without the permission of Ministry of Environment in the region of Aravalli. This was only implemented by one state, that was Haryana. And in Haryana, it was basically implemented in only one region, that was Gurugram. Then there is your T.N. Godvarman judgment, very famous, according to which forest must be understood according to the dictionary meaning itself. All statutorily recognized forest, either reserved or protected as well as on the private land, will now fall in the category of forest, and thus they shall be protected under the Forest Conservation Act of 1980. As per the directive in Samanta case, Supreme Court further expanded the meaning of the forest to also include the pastures and the grasslands which are found in this Aravalli range. As per the MC Mehta versus Union of India, Supreme Court basically banned the extraction of groundwater and mining in the such regions where these Aravalli hills exist, like for example Faridabad, Gurugram and Mewat. Even then, borewells are still active and the mining still takes place for critical mineral. In the Kant Enclave case, the land which was notified under the Punjab Land Preservation Act, it was said that it will also be treated as the forest. In this kind of a series of orders, what is the recent order and why it has caused so much furor among the environmental conservationists? Let's try to assess that. So Supreme Court said that, see, first and foremost, Aravallis are very important reason for us. Good till here. And thus, we prohibit the granting of fresh mining leases in Aravallis. Very good. Supreme Court ordered a central empowered committee will be created. And that will take a kind of a complete scientific mapping of this region. Macro level environment impact assessment will take place and strict prohibition will be implemented on the mining in such ecological sensitive areas. Everyone was happy till here. Everyone was clapping. MC Mehta was clapping. T.N. Godvarman was clapping. Then comes the next directive. Directive was that now there will exist a uniform definition of Aravallis, and that is, for fresh mining leases, only hills which are above the height of 100 meter actually falls in the category of Aravalli hills and ranges. And only for these hills which have height or altitude of more than 100 meter, for them a management plan for sustainable mining will be created. For rest of them, no permission is required. Lot of mining leases can be released by the government. And this becomes the issue. Because if we refer to the central panel's definition of Aravalli, which treats a landform as a part of Aravalli only if it has at least 100 meters of elevation above the local relief, including the landform slope and adjacent areas, then only 8.7% of the entire Aravallis will remain protected. Over 90% of Aravalli is actually lesser than 100 meter elevation. So according to the internal assessment of the Forest Survey of India, only 10,000 or 12,000 map hills actually meet the 100 meter height criteria, which is actually less than 9%. Thus, what will be the impact of it? Just look here, the scientific and the ecological consequences of the loss of such lower hill. If these hills will not be protected, these small plateaus which are acting as a kind of a barrier to this sand and dust flow, then as we discussed, the large scale desertification, sand dust, various sandstorms, they will start taking place in the region of Delhi, Western UP, Haryana, increased dust exposure and sandstorm instances. And all of these are what? The particulate matters which we are discussing, the PM 2.5 and 10. Thus, don't you think that the pollution level is further going to increase, leading to what? The issue of summer pollution which we are facing even today. And thus, it will act as a kind of a disaster for already struggling, heavily polluted national capital region. So, what are the steps which shall be taken as an imperative for us? First and foremost is to actually revise the definition of Aravallis. At least brought it up to 500 meters as it is being suggested by various environmental conservationists. Also, the hills which are less than 50 meters, they shall also be provided some kind of protection. Then, the ecological sensitive areas, and as defined under section 3 of EPA 1986. All of these Aravallis shall be put under this ecological sensitive areas. Thus, we can end up, kind of completely prohibiting some activities in this region, like for example, commercial mining, commercial use of timber, creation or establishment of any polluting industry, or passing of any major hydroelectric projects, or discharge of any solid waste in this region. Then we can also selectively regulate such activities like felling of trees, establishment of recreational structures, commercial use of natural water, underground cables, as well as the drastic change in the cropping patterns, which shall be regulated entirely. Also, we need to put large-scale afforestation in this region under Green India Mission, which was launched in 2014 and is indeed a centrally sponsored scheme, where we have taken a kind of a land degradation neutrality target for us, where we have promised that we are going to restore 26 million hectares of degraded land by 2030, which better place to start from these Aravallis itself, right? So let's start first from here. Also, increase the forest cover on 5 million hectare of forest and non-forest land. Improve the quality of forest cover further on additional 5 million hectare of forested land. And that will help us to what? To actually enhance the carbon dioxide sequestration by 60 million tons by the year of 2030. Thus to further achieve our Panchamrit target. Remember all of these arguments, a very probable question, attempt this and we move forward to the next news. Moving to the very innovative initiative which we have taken, and that is the value addition for the mains 2026, where we are going to provide you some very important value addition parts which you can very selectively use in your mains examination for the value enrichment and fetching that one extra mark. So one very important case study which people can actually quote in your ethics paper is this year's kind of lapse of duty which has taken place among the government officials. What is the context? So as the government has transferred very recently the CBSE chairman and the secretary amid the ongoing on-screen marking law, the kind of the leader of opposition has reiterated his demand for sacking of the minister and said that such mere transfers of the officers which takes place does not amount to accountability, rather it is a cover-up. Thus, this issue can also raise as an example or as a case study when you people are showing the lack of accountability on the part of the civil servants. So, first and foremost, if a question comes on accountability, you people can actually start your answer by adding some very important quotes. Like for example, you can quote Socrates, who said that an unexamined life is not worth living. So keep this in mind that one of the very important component of accountability is self-examination of one's action and thus kind of indulging into the moral scrutiny of the acts which you are taking. So for example, let's say if you are a bureaucrat, before being accountable to the government, to the public, first and foremost, there shall prevail a kind of a concise within you that you have got this important responsibility on your shoulder and thus you keep on indulging into the moral scrutiny of the acts which you are performing. Thus, we can further substantiate this quote by a quote which was said by Mahatma Gandhi. And he said that the highest quote which exists is the quote of conscience, where conscience as a value basically acts as a guiding light for each and every action you are taking. Let's say for example, sometimes your conscience is also guided by the intuitive conscience or the intuitive experiences which you had. Let's say for example, as a normal human being, you actually went to a government office where you had some very important work, but you were actually required to stay in the line for hours, and ultimately when finally you reached to the government official basically ended up demanding for an unscrupulous amount, right? That basically leads to what? Lack of financial propriety also on the behalf of the government official. So because you have faced that ordeal, the intuitive conscience guides you to make sure that you does not pass that ordeal which you have faced to the other honest people. And thus there act a kind of a guiding light of the conscience which ensures that you remain accountable. And the very simple formula is to implement, and that is the categorical imperative of Immanuel Kant, which basically says all your acts shall be done in the nature that they become the universal law, or just act or respond to other people how you want them to respond to you. So if you want that your children shall never be cheated whenever they are giving any examination, or some paper leak shall not take place, or let's say for example such on-screen marking row where the students are being allotted wrong marks, all of this doesn't take place with your children, then in the capacity of power you also ensure the same for the other children also, and that is basically the simple understanding of the categorical imperative. So you can choose any one of them, any quote on accountability, and start with them. Then you can write a very kind of a formal definition of accountability. Accountability is what? Is a kind of an ethical obligation to explain, justify and take responsibility for your action before your conscience or your society, or you are bounded by the law, or keep this in mind, the idea of sustainable development where we as a society are also responsible to our future generation, right? What if there does not take place any mechanism to ensure accountability of this public servant? Then what can take place? Then takes place the corruption. As per the Corruption Perception Index of 2025, India has ranked abysmally low at 91st out of 182 countries. And where our score is 39, keep this in mind, which is below the global average. The least corrupt countries are Denmark and Finland, and the most corrupt countries are South Sudan and Somalia. Keep this in mind. So we can quote the your Corruption Perception Index 2025 as well, or we can basically quote the warning which was given to us by the Lord Acton, where he said that the power tends to corrupt, but absolute power, unchecked power, corrupts absolutely. And thus we have some legal mechanism also to ensure the accountability of public servant, which you people can very selectively utilize, such as for example Prevention of Corruption Act 1988, which criminalizes bribery, abuse of official position and any illicit enrichment. There is a constitutional directive as well from given by Article 148 to 151, which basically empowers the Comptroller and Auditor General of our country to audit the government expenditure and identify any financial irregularity or misuse of public fund if it has taken place. Also, the Central Civil Services Conduct Rules of 1965, which allows the suspension, inquiry or removal of public servant for any kind of misconduct and dereliction of duty. Ultimately, the Right to Information Act of 2005, which enables the citizen to demand official record, promote transparency and expose any such administrative misconduct if it has taken place. So keep this information very dear to you, and we move forward to the next news, where we'll try to assess that why the Indian economy is actually moving towards or focusing towards the fixed deposit more than the saving bank accounts. An argument which has come in the today's newspaper, according to which the composition of bank deposits in India has actually undergone a significant shift over the past 5 years, with savers increasingly moving their money from the low yield saving accounts to higher return term deposit according to the RBI's latest data, where RBI is basically sharing us a data according to which the saving deposits, which in aggregate bank deposit. So what is the share of the saving deposit in the total bank deposit which we have? It has actually started declining from being 34% in 2022 to 28% in March 2026, which basically reflects the changing preferences among the depositor in a rising interest rate environment. So first, let's try to understand the simple difference between a current account, a saving account and a fixed deposit. A current account is basically designed for frequent business transaction, where on a current account, keep this in mind, that you people basically does not get any interest rate by the bank at all, where you can have unlimited deposit and withdrawal at any given point of time. And here the minimum balance requirement is usually high but varies within the bank to bank, and the target customers are your business firms, companies, traders, etc. Then for middle class income, which we're discussing, right, 30 to 35% of our economy, they basically keep their money either in saving or fixed deposit. Saving accounts are designed for personal saving and day-to-day banking, where for whatever money you are keeping with the bank, you basically get a moderate interest that is typically 2.5 to 7%. Here, however, you have a limited and free withdrawal as per the bank rule, and you basically, the minimum balance requirement is usually low, or zero balance options are also available, basically for salaried individuals, students, households. The fixed deposits are designed for investment and wealth preservation, where the bank actually offers you higher interest rate among the all three, where premature withdrawal actually is allowed but usually with penalty. So basically it is also termed as a term deposit where you are keeping your money for, let's say, 1 year time period and you are not touching it at all, or 2 years or something like that. Here there is no minimum balance after deposit creation and fixed amount is locked for a kind of a tenure. Keep this in mind, right? Now coming back, let's say what the data is telling us. Data is telling us that how the people are actually keeping their money in the saving bank accounts a bit lesser. Rather, they are actually moving towards higher return fixed deposit. So this fixed deposit or term deposit, it actually was around 55% of the total aggregate deposit in 55% in 2022, and it has increased to 61% by 2026. Why? Because the banks are actually offering attractive rates on this fiscal deposit to mobilize long-term resources and support the credit growth. So try to understand this, that before all of arrival of these stock market apps, right, like Grow, for let's take an example, the people usually used to keep their savings and money with the banks only. But now the people have got various other avenues to make short-term profit, right? Let's say for example betting, or for example investing in as a retail trader on stock market. So the banks are not having a consistent flow of money. Also, they are not having money which is kept for a long term of time, so that they can actually lend that money to the business, corporates, financial institutions to make the profit. Thus, the banks are now basically providing a higher interest rate on the long-term resources to actually support the credit growth. For example, the State Bank of India actually gives you 6.45% of interest rate on a 2-year fiscal kind of a fixed deposit. However, it gives you only 2.5% interest rate on any saving accounts. Keep this in mind, because in saving accounts you can withdraw the money whenever you want. Remember, either this saving account or this fixed deposit or a recurring deposit or this current account, all of this basically forms the liability for the bank, because the bank is paying the interest to you. So bank does what? Takes money from you and raise the funds from the customer by giving them what? Home loan, loan against property, business loan, vehicle loan, working capital. Bank earn through the interest spread and processing fees, and thus all of this act as an asset for the bank. Keep this in mind. Here, because the bank is paying you the interest, that's why it is a liability on the account of the bank. So now, the saving bank deposit rate, which is around 2.48%, is actually lesser than the retail inflation rate which exists. So basically we can say that, let's say for example, I keep my money in the saving account, okay? And I'm not going to touch it anyway for 2 months. But in 2 months, the kind of the interest rate which I am, being taken from the bank is around 2.48%. So let's say I kept approximately 100 rupees. And after 2 months from my saving account, when I'm withdrawing the money, the bank is telling me you take 102 rupees from us. I'm like, okay, no problem. Seems very good deal to me. But in 2 months, the inflation has actually increased by 3.48. So what if I kept this 100 rupees because I wanted to purchase a thing which was, let's say, 102 rupees I thought after 2 months. But now when I'm withdrawing the same amount, the cost of that product has actually increased by 3.48%, that is inflation. So basically the real return on the saving is actually coming negative for me. I cannot afford that product anymore. What is the implication of this? The purchasing power of money in a saving account is actually eroding over time. Also, if it comes to the total aggregate deposit which we have with the banks, keep this in mind that the household sector is the largest contributor with 59% share in the total saving, total deposits. Non-financial sector is the second, 18.5%, and financial corporation is third, 7.8%. The demand deposit, which includes saving and current account, is approximately 31.65 lakh crore, and the term deposit for long term is approximately 225 or 225 lakh crores. Keep all of these things very dear to you, right? And we move forward to the next news, where we'll quickly try to learn some very interesting facts about a very important protected area which has actually appeared in the news today. Why Simlipal Tiger Reserve is in the news? Because when the tigress Jeenat arrived in Odisha's Simlipal Tiger Reserve in late 2024, the wildlife officials hoped that it would help balance the gene pool at what is, remember, the only home in India of a rare tiger population. So this Simlipal Tiger Reserve, which is actually spread across the northern Odisha, is home to India's only known population of pseudo-melanistic tigers, which are also popularly called as black tigers. Why? Because they have unusually thick black stripes that merge across their coats. So, some very interesting fact about Simlipal Tiger Reserve, which is the part of the Mayurbhanj Elephant Reserves in Odisha. Why it is called Simlipal? Because here you will find a tree which is called as Simuli. Simuli is basically red silk cotton, also called as Malabar cotton. Here you can actually see the great number of population of some very rare species, like for example Bengal tiger, which is listed as endangered on IUCN, Asian elephant, which is also listed as endangered, Gaur, which is vulnerable, right, the Indian bull, and Chaura Singha, or the four-horned antelope, which is also listed as vulnerable. Keep this in mind that Simlipal Tiger Reserves also forms a critical part of UNESCO World Network of Biosphere Reserves. Here, there actually drains 12 small rivers. Two important rivers are Kharkai and Dio rivers, and there exist tribes like Ho and Santhal tribes. We have also put a test your knowledge section towards the end of this session. So remember, whatever is being taught to you, keep on learning them right here itself so that you can apply them in the form of PYQs towards the end of the session. Okay? Also, some fact sheet which you should keep very dear to you for prelims 2027. By the year of 1973, when the Project Tiger was launched, at that point of a time, we had 9 tiger reserves, and the total number of population of tiger was approximately 1827. However, if we refer to the census, which was released in the year of 2022, according to it, released in the year of 2023, 55 tiger reserves has been listed in our country, and there exists a population of more than 3,600 tigers. Keep this in mind. India is home to approximately 3/4 of the tiger population in the world, and to specifically preserve them, cater them, National Tiger Conservation Authority has been created under the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, which is chaired not by the Prime Minister, rather by the Minister of Environment. If UPSC asks you or give you a statement, which state has the highest tiger numbers, that is Madhya Pradesh, followed by Karnataka, Uttarakhand, Maharashtra, and then Tamil Nadu. The state with lowest tiger number is Nagaland and Mizoram. Population is 0 entirely, right? Even though the people of Nagaland are very good, but 0 population of tiger. So is in Mizoram. Rajasthan has a population of 1. Goa has 5. Arunachal has 9. Which reserve has the highest tiger population? That is Jim Corbett in Uttarakhand, followed by Bandipur in Karnataka, Nagarhole in Karnataka, Bandhavgarh in Madhya Pradesh, Dudhwa in Uttar Pradesh, Mudumalai in Tamil Nadu, Kaziranga in Assam, Kanha in Madhya Pradesh, and Sundarban in West Bengal. Then there also exists some reserves which has no population of tiger at all, like Dampa in Mizoram, Kamlang in Arunachal, Kaval in Telangana, Satkosia in Odisha, and Sahyadri in Maharashtra. So approximately 15 to 20 tiger reserves has been covered here itself. Keep them in your mind, keep the location in your mind, keep Simlipal's tiger reserve as well as how it is the home to India's only population of pseudo-melanistic tigers. And we move forward to the next news, where I will quickly try to cover a new index which is going to be released by the government, which is nothing but a kind of a reformation which the government is going to bring to the wholesale price index which used to exist. What is the context of the news? The center will end up phasing out the wholesale price index over the next 5 years while simultaneously introducing a more detailed producer price index covering output, input, and service prices in a bid to offer a more realistic assessment of inflationary trends in the economy. So let's first try to develop a basic understanding about the consumer price index, on which we measure the inflation which is prevailing in the economy, and wholesale price index. Consumer price index basically, kind of assess the price changes from the perspective of retail buyer like you and me, where we include what? Both goods and services, because we consume both of them. Earlier, the weight of the food items used to be of the very high side of 45%, but now we have reduced down and brought it down to approximately 36.75%. Who releases this consumer price index to calculate the inflation from the side of retail buyers like you and me? That is National Statistic Office, working under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. The base year has been recently revised and has brought down to the latest 2024, keep this in mind. And when the Monetary Policy Committee, which has a target to kind of ensure a stable inflation in our country ranging from 2 to 6%, this Monetary Policy Committee actually uses this consumer price index data to control the inflation. Wholesale price index actually, kind of assess the price changes in the goods sold and traded by the wholesale business. Remember earlier this wholesale price index was entirely focused only on the good. The weight of food items here was approximately 24%. This was released, wholesale price index was released by the Office of Economic Advisor, and the base year has recently been changed to 22-23. Now the government is bringing an entire new producer price index, which is going to be released by the Department of Personnel and Internal Training, with the revised series of wholesale price index with new base year of 22-23. This new series of producer price index is going to come from June 15, which will include your output producer price index, input producer price index, as well as services. So earlier the services was not part of it, but now the services has also been included in this reformation of wholesale price index, which will become producer price index. 7 services is going to be included initially: banking, security transaction, insurance, management of pension funds, railways, air, but only related to the passenger component, and telecom. Why we are doing that? Because we are trying to align with the global best practices recommended by the IMF. This input producer price index is actually going to give us a much better idea about the supply side inflation. So for example, let's say if you're talking about the increase of the input cost of logistic because of the imported inflation, or the increase in the input cost, why? Because of the supply chain barriers being created by China on the critical mineral. So if because of that the inflation is taking place in the economy, we will be able to assess that also through this input PPI. Also, it will actually tell us by the inflation which we are experiencing by the input items, and we'll be able to better assess the imported inflation which is taking place. This is the inflation rate for March 2026, where the weight of the various item has been listed, and you guys can very specifically see the inflation rate. And now kind of put this inflation rate on one side and the kind of the interest which is providing on the saving bank accounts by the bank, measure it, you see how the interest rates are on the higher side. Thus the real purchasing power is actually on the negative, and that's why people are trying to make more money by actually investing or keeping their money on the fixed term. That is the idea. We move forward to the last news of the day, where we'll quickly try to assess a new missile system which has been developed by our country. So what is this? This is Rudram 2 missile, which has been indigenously developed by DRDO and tested by the Indian Air Forces. Keep this in mind. It is not surface to air, rather air to surface hypersonic missile with a speed of Mach 5.5 and with a range of up to 300 to 350 kilometers. So obviously we cannot end up remembering the missile range for each and every different kind of missiles which exist. But keep this in mind when the UPSC uses such vocabulary, like for example up to. So up to the range of 350. So they can also give you the range of 50, 100, 150, 300, and mostly it is correct only. Then integrated and deployed from what? Sukhoi Su-30 MKI aircraft, which is not indigenously developed, rather we procure it from Russia. Remember that this Rudram, starting from R, is an anti-radiation missile, as it can target what? Enemy radars, jammers, radios. Then several other missiles are there, like for example Prithvi, which is surface to surface short range ballistic missile, Agni, which is surface to surface nuclearly capable ballistic missile, K-15 Sagarika is a nuclearly capable but submarine launched ballistic missile, Shore is a canister launched hypersonic ballistic missile, Nirbhay is a long range subsonic cruise missile, and BrahMos is also a cruise missile and not a ballistic missile. Keep the distinction in your mind. Whatever we have learned today, just try to pause on this screen, try to solve these questions from just recall basis and see whether you are able to get to your answers or not. Solve these PYQs, attempt kind of comment down your answer. And with this, we have reached to the end of our discussion today. Do not forget to attempt the questions at the end of the video and test your knowledge. We will meet in a very interesting discussion very soon. Till then, all the very best for your preparation, and thank you.